All right, Stephanie, we're good to go.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Bloomingdale Neighborhood History Group's May Zoom presentation. I'm Stephanie Azzarone, and I'm a member of the group's planning committee. A little bit about us before we begin the formal presentation. The group was formed over 20 years ago. Its mission is to discover, explore, preserve, and share the history of the Bloomingdale neighborhood, which stretches from 96th Street to 110th Street, Central Park to Riverside Park. Our focus is research and education. We offer a broad variety of services, all free, including presentations such as this evening's walking tours by Jim Mackin. We have blogs and a newsletter and a website and a special collection of materials at the Bloomingdale branch of the New York Public Library, and most recently, a neighborhood history wall at that same library. So to learn more about the group and upcoming events, please visit us at our website, upperwestsidehistory.org. There are three of us on the Zoom call tonight. My fellow planning committee member, Michael Gonzalez, is our tech guru, and will also share your questions with our speaker at the end of her presentation. Michael, how would you like the audience to submit those questions?
So you guys can either submit them throughout the chat as we go through the presentation, or there's a Q&A portion in the next to the chat area in the mute button. You can also put your questions in there, and then we'll answer them towards the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Michael. The title of our presentation tonight is The Paterno Buildings in Bloomingdale, an immigrant family's contribution to the Upper West Side. In 1880, the Paterno family immigrated to New York City from Castelmazzano, Italy, and later built 164 buildings in Manhattan, mostly apartment houses, many of them on the Upper West Side, and 32 in Bloomingdale alone. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Carla Paterno Cappiello Golden, great-granddaughter of Dr. Charles V. Paterno. Carla started researching her family and their architectural legacy 3 years ago, and has, for the first time in history, cataloged, researched, and photographed all of her family's known buildings. Tonight, she will share her knowledge of those Bloomingdale buildings and the very prolific family of builders behind them. Carla, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me here tonight. I'm delighted to be with you. So I appreciate that lovely introduction, and thank you to Michael for the technical support. I am delighted to be here with all of you to share a bit about my family's architectural legacy in Manhattan, specifically in your beloved neighborhood. The people you see in black and white are the Paterno family. Third from the left is Dr. Charles V. Paterno, my great-grandfather. He had one son named Carlo, who had three daughters, one of which is my mother. Prior to the 2020 pandemic, I knew the basic facts about my Paterno ancestors, and it was during the shutdown when I took a deep dive into their story. This is when I discovered that the Paternos built far more many buildings than any of us ever knew. It's my guess that the Paternos probably never tallied their own projects. To my knowledge, my accounting of the Paterno construction projects is the first time they have all been listed together. I am coming to you tonight from my home on Hilton Head Island in South Carolina. Most of my research is done remotely, with occasional visits to Manhattan and with the help of kind, smart friends in the city. All right, let's jump in. Papa Giovanni Paterno left Castelmazzano, Italy in 1880 to seek work as a builder. 5 years later, Mama Carolina and their four oldest children set off to join Giovanni, now going by John, in Manhattan. The six younger children were born in New York. Castelmazzano is a small mountain village in the Basilicata region of southern Italy, where the red pin is on the map. In 1899, Papa John Paterno unexpectedly died at the young age of 48, leaving behind his widow, Carolina, and their 10 children. At the time of his death, Papa John had 2 unfinished construction projects underway. While oldest son Severio transported their father back to their homeland, 18-year-old Joseph, who had been apprenticing alongside Papa John, was tasked with completing the building projects. Being so young, Joseph felt he needed immediate help, so recruited his older brother Charles, who was 21, had just graduated from the Medical College of Cornell University and was in residency at the old Bellevue Hospital. Together, Joseph and Charles completed the projects, sold them, and as a partial payment, accepted an empty lot. Committing to just one more project together, the brothers filled the empty lot with a new apartment house, sold it, and profited nicely. It was then that Dr. Charles V. Paterno realized that he would likely earn more money in construction than by practicing medicine, and this was when Paterno Brothers Construction Company was born. Dr. Paterno never practiced medicine, yet maintained the title of doctor throughout his lifetime. The Paterno brothers didn't include just Charles and Joseph. It included all 5 Paterno brothers, Severio, Charles, Joseph, Michael, and Anthony, as well as all 5 brothers-in-law, Victor Sarabone, Anthony Campagna, Joseph Faella, Ralph Chiluzzi, Armino Campagna, and son-in-law Michael Campagna. Some in the audience tonight might recognize the name of Anthony Campagna, who earned his own reputation as a successful builder of luxury apartment houses. Some may not know that he was the husband of Marie Paterno, and along with Armino and Michael, the Campagna brothers were second cousins to the Paterno siblings, all hailing from Castelmezzano. Together, the Paterno family built 164 total buildings in Manhattan from 1896 to 1964. Only 14 of these buildings had been demolished. There were a total of 155 apartment houses, 4 family homes, 1 castle, 1 garage, now condo, 1 Times Square theater, 1 university cultural center, and 1 tiny steel house, many of which we will see tonight. The 164 Paterno buildings in Manhattan reached from 35th Street to 188th Street, between Riverside Drive and East End Avenue. The blue pins on the map represent existing buildings, and the red map pins mark the location of demolished buildings. This map blocks off with stars the section of the Upper West Side known as Bloomingdale, where 32 Paterno buildings were built. It's likely that you will recognize many of these buildings from their exterior presence. I have many photos to share of lobbies and architectural details that you might not have yet seen. So let's check them out. The first Paterno building built in Bloomingdale was at 154 West 106th Street, which you can see marked with one of the red stars. Standing between Amsterdam and Columbus Avenues, it was constructed in 1896 by John Paterno and his early building partner, James McIntosh. Next came 151 West 106th Street, which is marked with the blue star. It too was built in 1896 by John Paterno and James McIntosh. The architect was Frank A. Lang. The third building was built the following year in 1897 at 156 West 106th Street. It was also designed by Frank A. Lang. Both 154 and 156, the 2 red stars, have been demolished, but 151 West 106th Street still stands. So let's take a closer look. This is the oldest existing Paterno building in all of Manhattan. It is a 5-story building with 10 apartments. How did John Paterno decide to start building in Bloomingdale, of all places in Manhattan? It was a matter of timing, opportunity, and demand. The Upper West Side was experiencing expedient development with a new university, cathedral, hospital, and subway line extension. At the same time, there was an influx of Italian and Eastern European Jews into the city. The speculative residential development of middle-class apartment houses on the Upper West Side was accessible to immigrants because the purchase of land and construction of such buildings was not limited by social connections, as it was on the more established and wealthy Upper East Side. In fact, the Paterno family moved from the Lower East Side to 930 Amsterdam Avenue between 105th and 106th Streets, directly in the neighborhood of the first Paterno buildings. Now, how's that for a short commute to work? Moving one block west on 106th Street, AKA Duke Ellington Boulevard, crossing over Amsterdam Avenue, we find 204 West 106th Street that was built by John Paterno alone. The 5-story building was designed by architect M.V.B. Furden. You'll see many stars on this slide, and I'll explain them each to you. In the tax photo on the left, you'll see the green star. That is the original 204, built by John Paterno. Sometime between 1951 and 1973, 204 was conjoined with the similar 5-story building next door, which is marked by the pink star. By the way, I love tax photos. If you were not familiar with them, around 1940, the city of New York made a photographic inventory of all existing buildings. The numbered sign in front of each building indicates the block number and the lot number, which correspond to city maps. In the case of 204 West 106th Street, it stands in block 1877 on lot 38. In the left photo, the pink star marks the doorway of the building next door. The yellow star marks a window of the building next door. The green star marks the Paterno building. In the middle and right photos, which were recently taken, we see at the pink star the former door for the building next door, which has been filled in. The former window, marked with the yellow star, has become the new entrance door for the conjoined buildings. The green star marks the original door of the Paterno building, which has been filled in. The building next door was originally 202 West 106th Street, but for a reason that I cannot comprehend, when the buildings were conjoined, the building next door was renumbered 204 West 106th Street. So the current 204 is not the original 204, and the original 204 no longer has its own number due to being conjoined. That is the maddening story of 204 West 106th Street, and let's move on from that. By 1901, John Paterno had died, and brothers Charles and Joseph took over his building business. After finishing their father's incomplete buildings on 112th Street, they came back to 105th Street between Amsterdam and Columbus Avenues in Bloomingdale to build the Salon with brother-in-law Victor Sarabone. The 7-story beige brick apartment house with round rooms on either front side is now part of the new Jewish home elder care campus. Like so many buildings, it lost its pronounced cornice, which you can see in the tax photo, but it has retained its ornate entrance and the original lobby tile. The following year, Charles and Joseph built El Casco Court at 205 to 209 West 103rd Street between Broadway and Amsterdam with architect George F. Pelham. George Frederick Pelham was born in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, to an architect father who moved the family and worked for New York City's Department of Public Parks. George was privately tutored and opened his own architectural firm in 1890, specializing in apartment houses, hotels, row houses, and commercial buildings. He designed buildings for over 4 decades, predominantly on the Upper West Side, and designed 29 buildings for the Paterno family. These tax photos show El Casco Court as it appeared in the 1940s. Note the bold cornice and the Loans and Diamonds advertisement on the sidewall. The photo on the right shows a faint memory of that booming advertisement. Sadly, the cornice is gone. Oftentimes, these are removed for safety reasons. On the night of May 16th, 1979, a terracotta chunk from the 8th floor window lintel of an apartment house in Morningside Heights came loose and fell to the sidewalk, killing a Barnard College freshman, Grace Gold. After her death, Local Law 10 mandated an inspection every 4 years of the facade of every residential building over 6 stories. Sometimes these architectural details are simply unstable and are less expensive to remove than to repair or maintain. El Casco Court has a beautiful entrance gate, which opens into a corridor which leads to the entrance door, inside of which is another original tile lobby of this 6-story apartment house. Unfortunately, we don't have a photographic record of Putnam Court at 148 to 142 West 104th Street between Amsterdam and Columbus Avenues because it was built in 1903 and demolished before the 1940 tax photo project. We only see it recorded on city maps as displayed here with the red star. We do know that Putnam Court was a 6-story apartment house designed by the architectural firm Schwartz and Gross and was built by Charles and Joseph. The property is now part of the large Frederick Douglass public housing development, which was built in the 1950s. Putnam Court was the first of 36 projects that Schwartz and Gross would design for the Paterno family. Graduates of the Hebrew Technical Institute, Simon Schwartz and Arthur Gross, were partners for nearly 4 decades, starting in 1903. Their partnership, which proved to be extremely successful, specialized in luxury apartment buildings and hotels. Schwartz and Gross is considered one of the firms whose numerous apartment houses helped shape the face and style of the Upper East and Upper West sides of Manhattan. Between 1903 and 1911, the Paterno brothers built more than 30 buildings, primarily in Morningside Heights. But back in Bloomingdale, the Mark Anthony is a 12-story apartment house at 514 Cathedral Parkway, aka 110th Street, between Broadway and Amsterdam Avenue. It was designed in 1911 by Schwartz and Gross and built by Charles Paterno. The U-shaped arts and crafts style brick apartment building was designed with 36 units with 5 to 7 rooms each. The name of the building commemorates a famous Italian, Marcus Antonius, who was a Roman orator, triumvir, and soldier. However, the building is now known as simply Cathedral Tower. Cathedral Tower. You can see in the 2 photos on the left of this slide that the Mark Anthony stands next to its twin building, the Prince Humbert. Here is the nearly identical 12-story Prince Humbert at 520 Cathedral Parkway, also designed in 1911 by Schwartz and Gross and built by Charles Paterno. The build was named after Italian King Umberto, who was king for only 34 days. In 1911, when the apartment house was built, Umberto was a young prince of 7 years old and expected to fully inherit and rule the throne for decades. The Prince Humbert was designed with 48 units of 4 to 5 rooms each, so more units than the Mark Anthony, but each smaller in size. You will notice in the newspaper advertisement that the Mark Anthony and the Prince Humbert are located at 214 and 220 Cathedral Parkway. These were their original addresses before the buildings on the north and south side of 110th Street were matched up, causing the Prince Humbert and the Mark Anthony to be renumbered. Also note the rental prices, $900 to $1,500 per year. To the right of the newspaper advertisement, you'll see the front door of the building. Note the window to the right. This is something you might have walked by 50 times and didn't even know it. Here is this beautiful little feature of the Prince Humbert, a stained glass window depicting what appears to be an Italian villa. Both the Mark Antony and Prince Humbert have these beautiful marble paneled lobbies. In 1911, Charles Paterno hired a new architect, Gaëtan Aiello, to design the 9-story Prince Monaco apartment house at 229 West 109th Street between Broadway and Amsterdam. Gaëtan Aiello was from Sicily, arriving in New York in 1902 at 19 years old. Trained in Italy, he soon set himself up as an architect, with his first recorded project dating in 1906. Next, he designed a few buildings for Bernard Crystal in Morningside Heights, putting him in the neighborhood of the Paterno family, who had built 33 buildings in the area already. Aiello was fond of placing a monogrammed cartouche with 1 or 2 initials of the builder on his creations. In total, Aiello designed 22 buildings for the Paterno family. Here we see the Prince Monaco just south of the Prince Humbert and Mark Antony. There are 6 terracotta monogrammed cartouches under the 5th and 7th stories of the building. 4 are shown in the bottom left image. The other 2 are blocked by the tree. 1 is enlarged in the upper right image so that you can see the detail. Here are 3 images of the Prince Monaco. The first on the left was taken in 1927 and shows it with full cornice, window awnings, and entrance marquee. The middle text photo has a pared down facade, but still sports the cornice. And on the left, in the recent photo, sadly, the cornice, like so many buildings, it has been removed. Here is the beautiful Italian Renaissance palazzo-style Mentone at 895 West End Avenue at the southwest corner of 104th Street in the Riverside West End Historic District. It was designed in 1912 by Gaëtan Aiello and built by Michael Paterno. It was named after a fashionable tourist town on the border of Italy and France. So I think it's Menton in French and Menatone in Italian, or something similar. Forgive my pronunciations. This is what the late, great Christopher Gray, writer of Streetscapes column in the New York Times, had to say about the Mentone. Quote, 895 West End Avenue has had all the luck. Its windows are original. Their wooden frames have a texture that even expensive metal replacements cannot approach. In the 1990s, the firm of Walter B. Melvin Architects replaced a missing cornice with an estimable reinterpretation using off-the-shelf brackets, but to good effect. Best of all, the first 2 stories are in limestone and big rusticated blocks. It's sort of a mini university club. And the stone is blessedly unpainted. Bring a loupe or even just a good pair of eyes and peer up close at the ancient shells and other sea creatures from millions of years ago. There is a particularly scary spider-like specimen below the second window to the left of the main entrance, and the whorls and patterns even run through the building's cornerstone. This part of West End has many good stretches of marine sediment turned to rock, unquote. The white brick and limestone Renaissance Revival styled Mentone was designed with 48 4 to 7 room units with 2 to 3 baths and included many then modern features such as water filtration, vacuum steam heating, private telephone lines, rooftop garden, and a garbage incinerator in the basement. Rents ranged from $1,000 to $2,450 per year. 12 total monogram cartouches are on the Mentone. A white marble foyer leads to the lobby. Note the burst of color awaiting as you enter the main door. In the lobby is this stunning Tiffany-style stained glass depiction of the Soldiers and Sailors Monument in Riverside Park. Up the marble staircase is another colorful stained glass window. Next door to the Mentone at the northwest corner of 103rd Street stands 885 West End Avenue. It was designed in 1915 by Gaetan Aiello and built by Joseph Paterno and is located in the Riverside West End Historic District. In these photos, the Mentone is the building on the right with the darker cornice. Designed in a Renaissance Revival style, 885 West End Avenue was built of steel, brick, granite, limestone, and terracotta. The creamy white glazed brick, terracotta ornamentation, and stone balconies are signature elements of Aiello, whose designs were inspired by his native Italy's Renaissance palazzi. This entrance door is not original. In fact, Christopher Gray considered them, quote, far too fancy replacement doors, unquote. The original plans consisted of 2 one-bedroom, 2 two-bedroom, and 1 three-bedroom apartment on each floor. Above the entrance door is a small round cartouche with Joseph's initials. Heading over to Riverside Drive at the corner of 108th Street in the Riverside West End Historic District, we have the 13-story Rutherford at 360 Riverside Drive. It was designed in 1915 by Gaetan Aiello and built by youngest Paterno brother, Anthony. The previous private home on this site was purchased by Paterno from John A. Rutherford in 1915 for $150,000. After the apartment house was completed and fully rented, Paterno sold it back to Rutherford as an investment for $450,000. Constructed of steel, brick, granite, limestone, and terracotta in a Renaissance Revival style, the Rutherford was originally designed for only 2 apartments per floor. You'll notice a 4-story external fire escape on the street side, ostensibly for an apartment that was fractionated and no longer had access to internal fire escape stairwells. Here's a little peek into the foyer and lobby. The doors are considered to be original to the building. I'm sorry, I just spun my little mouse ball and lost my spot. Here we are, back to the Rutherford. You'll see the name of the building over the front door in the double-story limestone arch. The cartouche here is blank, but being a yellow building, we can expect to find a monogram somewhere. On Google Maps, remember I'm in South Carolina, so I use a lot of Google mapping. I zoomed in as close as possible and felt confident there was a monogrammed cartouche under the 12th floor center window, but it wasn't until this past March when I visited in person with my trusty binoculars that I confirm it is indeed there. This is a photo I took with my phone zoomed all the way in. And then the zoom of the zoom is still fuzzy, but the letter P cartouche was clear with my binoculars. Why one small monogram cartouche way up on the 12th floor of a 13-story building? Who knows, but it is there. Here's another beauty designed in 1916 by Gaetan Aiello and built by Joseph and Anthony Paterno at the northwest corner of 104th Street in the Riverside West End Historic District. Like so many Aiello buildings, the 13-story 905 West End Avenue building was designed in an Italian Renaissance style. Built of steel, brick, granite, limestone, and terracotta, the cornice is no longer present and the terracotta balcony railings have been replaced with fiberglass replicas. However, the double-story entrance surround is as elegant as ever. The center cartouche features the initials of Joseph Paterno. Here in the middle is Aiello's sketch of the entrance. and a close-up of the monogram cartouche. In this classic Aiello lobby, we find a marble staircase and intricate stained glass windows. Here is a typical floor plan of 905 West End Avenue, showing 4 apartments of varying sizes. 905 West End Avenue was designed to house 52 total units, 4 apartments per floor of 6 to 8 rooms each. In 1919, Gaetan Aiello designed for Joseph and Anthony Paterno this 13-story apartment building at 884 West End Avenue at the northeast corner of 103rd Street in the Riverside West End Historic District. Built of steel, brick, limestone, and terracotta, the building is scaled back for a Gaetan Aiello design. It has a modest lobby, yet features a spectacular 2-story entrance arch centered with a monogram cartouche of Joseph Paterno's initials. 884 West End Avenue reportedly took just 8 months to build and was designed to house 78 apartments with 6 to 8 rooms each and 2 to 3 baths. Here is a typical floor plan showing 5 apartments. The following year, once again, Gaetan Aiello designed for Joseph Paterno another 13-story apartment house at 325 Riverside Drive at the southeast corner of 105th Street. The vacant plot was purchased from William Randolph Hearst. Located in the Riverside West End Historic District, the entrance of this building is at 330 West 105th Street. The 13-story colonial revival style building originally consisted of 4 apartments per floor with 4 to 6 rooms each that rented from $2,600 to $4,300 per year in 1920 and dropped down to starting just at $1,000 per year in 1933 due to the Great Depression. The red brickwork is laid in what is called Flemish bond, characterized by alternating headers or long bricks and stretchers or short bricks. Above the front door is another magnificent monogram cartouche with the initials JP for the builder. Joseph sold 325 Riverside Drive in 1923. In the lobby, we see the trademark Aiello marble staircase. Constructed of steel, brick, limestone, granite, and terracotta, this apartment house contained a total of 52 units, 4 per floor. Heading 5 blocks north up to 375 Riverside Drive on the southeast corner of Cathedral Parkway is located a 15-story apartment house designed by none other than Gaetan Aiello in 1921 for Michael Paterno and his brother-in-law, Ralph Chaluzzi, husband of Teresa Paterno. It was designed in a Renaissance revival style and constructed with steel, tan brick, limestone, granite, and terracotta. We have another beautiful double-story entrance with beautiful terracotta detailing. Sadly, the cartouche is not monogrammed, but a beautiful wooden revolving door stands at the entrance. And I am not clear yet whether that revolving door is original to the building or not. The building originally housed 86 units of 4 to 7 rooms each with 1 to 2 baths. 375 Riverside Drive was sold in May 1923 to investors, as so many Paterno buildings were. The Paternos would construct the building, fully rent the apartments, and sell the package as a low-risk, already income-producing investment to investors. At 915 West End Avenue at the southwest corner of 105th Street, we find this 15-story apartment house designed in 1922 by Rosario Candela for Joseph Paterno, his wife Jewel Paterno, and brother-in-law Anthony Campagna. This is the earliest Candela Paterno building in Bloomingdale. Situated in the Riverside West End Historic District, it took 348 days to build with steel, brick, granite, and terracotta. Rosario Candela was a Sicilian-American architect who emigrated to New York around 1912 when he was 22 years old. He graduated from the Columbia University School of Architecture in 1915. After graduation, he apprenticed for Gaetano Aiello and went into private practice in 1920. His first project in all of Manhattan was for Paterno brother-in-law Anthony Campagna in 1922. Rosario Candela, over time, earned the reputation of a premier designer of luxury apartment houses for some of the most desirable addresses in the city. When Gaetano Aiello left Manhattan for other pursuits, it was natural that the Paterno family took up projects with his apprentice, Rosario Candela, who would become a prolific and favorite architect for the Paternos and a much celebrated architect in Manhattan. He designed a total of 40 buildings for the Paternos. 915 West End Avenue was Candela's third project for the family. 915 West End Avenue was designed to house 75 suites of 3 to 7 rooms and 1 to 3 baths. Just 6 years earlier, Joseph built the building next door at 905 West End Avenue. The main floor featured 2 doctor's offices, and the rooms of the apartments were said to be of liberal size with an abundance of closet space. According to advertisements, the rooms originally were paneled and painted and had herringbone hardwood floors in all the living rooms, dining rooms, and foyers. 915 West End Avenue was sold by Joseph in 1923. Above the entrance is a monogrammed cartouche featuring JP for Joseph Paterno. The ornate iron front doors are reportedly original to the building. The apartment house at 878 West End Avenue at the northeast corner of 103rd Street was designed in 1922 by Rosario Candela for Ralph Chiluzzi, husband of Teresa Paterno. It stands 15 stories tall and was built in just 359 days. Located in the Riverside West End Historic District, 878 West End Avenue was constructed of steel, brick, granite, limestone, and terracotta. Above the entrance door, there is a center cartouche monogrammed with a C for Chiluzzi, or Candela might like to think it was for Candela. An April 1923 New York Tribune article stated that, quote, "The new building is made up of 3 and 4 bedroom apartments to house 60 families. Partitions between the apartments are soundproof," unquote. Ralph Chiluzzi sold the fully rented 878 West End Avenue in December of 1923. The 16-story apartment house at 290 Riverside Drive at the northeast corner of 101st Street was built by Dr. Charles B. Paterno in 1923. It was designed by George F. Pelham. Located in the Riverside Drive West End Historic District, 290 Riverside Drive was built of steel, brick, and limestone in a neo-Gothic style and features a Tudor arched entrance on the 101st Street side with rosettes and scallop shells. I love the details here. Apartments were 3 to 6 rooms each. In 1939, a 4-room apartment rented for $1,020 per year, 5 rooms for $1,250 per year, and 6 rooms for $1,650 per year. And apartment 1F that you see in the photo on the right has its own private entrance on Riverside Drive. It appears that Dr. Paterno had earlier plans for this property in 1915 with a 12-story design by Gaetano Aiello, but didn't build here until 1923 with this plan by George Pelham. Built in 1923 by Victor Sarabone, husband of Celestina Paterno, and his son-in-law, Michael A. Campagna, the Charlton stands 15 stories tall and was designed by Rosario Candela. The most delightful feature for me of the Charlton at 300 West 108th Street on the southwest corner of Broadway is the Lion's Head cornice. From ground level, one would hardly even know that they are there. Luckily, a segment of the cornice is mounted in the lobby for up-close viewing. Above the entrance door is a terracotta shield with the initial C for Sarabone, but could also include, in this case, Campagna, Candela, and Charlton. It was originally designed with 21 units of 3 to 6 rooms with 1 to 3 baths, a ground floor doctor's office, and 7 shops on the Broadway side. It was advertised as having, quote, every room an outside room, unquote. The Charlton took just 305 days to build and was sold in 1924 to an investor. Designed in an Italian Renaissance style in 1923 by Rosario Candela and built by Ralph Chiluzzi, husband of Teresa Paterno, the 15-story apartment house at 875 West End Avenue on the southwest corner of 103rd Street took just 335 days to build. Located in the Riverside West End Historic District, 875 West End Avenue was constructed of steel, brick, limestone, and terracotta. Above the entrance door is this interesting crest with the monogram of Ralph Chiluzzi and or Rosario Candela. Additionally, the vintage entrance lamps, I think, are worth enjoying. Inside the lobby are marble floors, ornate ceilings and molding, and stained glass windows. In 1928, Chiluzzi sold 875 West End Avenue to an investor. 875 West End Avenue originally housed 105 apartments ranging from 3 to 7 rooms with 1 to 3 baths. Several 1924 advertisements declared the building to feature 1,500 windows, 4 gurney electrical elevators, and ample closet space. Here is a typical floor plan showing 7 apartments. The 15-story plus penthouse apartment building at 755 West End Avenue at the southwest corner of 97th Street was designed by Rosario Candela in 1924 and built by Joseph F. Faella, husband of Rose Paterno. It took 417 days to build and stands in the Riverside West End Historic District. Designed in a neoclassical style with red brick, the limestone entrance is flanked by Corinthian pilasters supporting a swan's neck pediment. Interestingly, Joseph Faella bought the property from Irving Judas and Joseph Silverson in 1924, and the following year sold the under construction building back to Irving Judas as an investment. The original design called for 3 apartments, 1 of 7 rooms and 3 baths, and 2 of 6 rooms and 3 baths per floor. In 1926, a 6-room apartment rented for $3,300 per year. On the first floor was a 3-room unit for a doctor or a dentist. The 15-story apartment building at 910 West End Avenue at the southeast corner of 105th Street was designed by George F. Pelham in 1924 and built by Victor Sarabone, husband of Celestina Paterno, and his son-in-law, Michael A. Campagna. Known as the Serena, it stands in the Riverside West End Historic District. It was designed originally to have 90 total units of 3 to 6 rooms and 1 to 3 baths each and 3 total elevators. The building was constructed of steel, light brick, granite, limestone, and terracotta. Featured on 901 West End Avenue are both Gothic ornamentation and Tudor arch entrance, pinnacles, and medieval inspired detail. Over the metal entrance gate, a letter C monogram is present to represent Cerebone and even, in this case, Campania. A 1925 advertisement read, quote, "Here are large, bright rooms arranged to lighten housekeeping cares, ample closet space in all apartments," unquote. The Serena was sold in 1930. And here is a typical floor plan showing 6 apartments. The 16-story apartment house at 865 West End Avenue on the northwest corner of 102nd Street was designed by Rosario Candela in 1924 and built by Joseph Paterno and Michael A. Campagna, son-in-law of Joseph's sister, Celestina. Standing in the Riverside West End Historic District, 865 West End Avenue was constructed in a neoclassical style out of steel brick, limestone, and terracotta. The 78 units were 5 to 7 rooms with 2 to 3 baths. In 1933, units rented for $1,300 and up per year. 865 West End Avenue features a monogrammed terracotta cartouche over the entrance doorway with JP for Joseph Paterno. Additionally, this is the only Paterno building known to have monogrammed entrance iron gate doors, also featuring the letters JP in the center of each door. Joseph sold the apartment house while still under construction to investors in 1925. The New York Herald describes 865 West End Avenue as, quote, "the 7th large apartment erected and sold in the immediate vicinity by Mr. Paterno in the last 4 years." Here is a typical floor plan showcasing 5 apartments. In total, the Paterno family built a corridor of 9 apartment houses along West End Avenue on the 3 blocks between 102nd and 105th Streets. The intersection of 103rd Street and West End Avenue, there is a Paterno family building on every corner. And when I was in Manhattan in March and wandering around this area, I wasn't looking at a map, so I didn't quite know exactly where the Paterno buildings were, and I certainly didn't have the numbers memorized. But I was walking along and I just felt something very strange come over me. And I started to look around and I saw all these monogram cartouches on these buildings. And I just felt so overwhelmed in the presence of what feels like giant ancestors to me. And it was just very heartwarming to sort of be caught up in this corridor unexpectedly. 800 West End Avenue at the southeast corner of 99th Street was designed in 1925 by Rosario Candela and built by, get this, Onratap Corporation. And I like to point this out because it is the backwards spelling of Paterno, Onratap, represented by Anthony A. Paterno. Located in the Riverside West End Historic District, the 15-story apartment house took only 272 days to build. The metal cornice is decorated with alternating fleur-de-lis and lion's heads. Constructed of steel, beige brick, limestone, and terracotta, 800 West End Avenue was designed in a neo-Renaissance style with 6 apartments per floor, ranging from 3 to 7 rooms with 1 to 3 baths. A beautiful monogram cartouche with side cornucopias embellishes the entrance doorway. The entire apartment house of 90 units was rented within 5 months of completion, and the building was sold in the fall of 1926. This 15-story apartment house at 315 106th Street between Riverside Drive and West End Avenue was designed in 1925 by Rosario Candela and built by Joseph Paterno and his nephew, John A. Paterno. The building was constructed from steel brick, limestone, granite, and terracotta in a Renaissance revival style. standing in the Riverside West End Historic District, 315 West 106th Street, took 366 days to build. Above the entrance door is a characteristic monogram cartouche. It's on display featuring the stylized initials of JP, which can represent both builders in this case, Joseph Paterno and John A. Paterno. In 1929, a New York Herald Tribune ad read, quote, "Live on the West Side and enjoy New York's most attractive residential and accessible section. Numbers of outstanding improvements now completed and others of great magnitude and course of construction will greatly enhance the value to Manhattan's most healthful location," unquote. Originally designed to house 46 units, 3 per floor, as this typical floor plan shows, units were 3 to 8 rooms with 1 to 3 baths. A 1933 ad listed a 6 to 7 room unit renting for $1,700 per year and 4 to 5 rooms for $1,200 per year. Now, at this point, I have a confession to make. My photographer friend has been taking photos for me since 2021, and he's worked through the list of 164 buildings up to building number 125. So I have few images for the next 4 apartment houses, as I've had to rely on what I could find on the internet. But the last building comes with a big story, so that'll hopefully make up for the shortage of photos. This 16-story building at 280 Riverside Drive, known as the Oxford, at the northeast corner of 100th Street, was designed in 1925 by Rosario Candela and built by Dr. Charles Paterno. It's located in the Riverside West End Historic District. Now, feast your eyes on this lobby. The entrance is on 100th Street, and once inside, one would think they were inside an actual Italian palazzo or castle. That ceiling is just gorgeous and over the top, literally and figuratively. Constructed of steel, red brick, limestone, and terracotta in a colonial revival style, it took 330 days to build. 280 Riverside Drive was originally designed with 85 units of 4 to 8 rooms with 1 to 4 baths. Here is a typical floor plan for floors 8 through 15, showing 7 apartments. 280 Riverside Drive, which we just saw, is marked with a blue star on the map. This building at 285 Riverside Drive, on the southeast corner of 101st Street, marked by the yellow star, was built at the same time in 1925, also by Dr. Charles Paterno, and 2 was a Rosario Candela design. Constructed of steel, beige brick, and stone in a Renaissance Revival style, it also stands in the Riverside Drive West End Historic District. In the photo on the right, the brick colors of the 2 buildings don't look very different, but the photo on the bottom left is a screenshot from Google Maps that shows 280 as definitely red brick and 285 is indeed beige brick. Again, we have this beautiful entrance, which is identical to 280, except for differently shaped side lamps, and another gorgeous lobby, mostly identical to 280, but for a blue toned ceiling compared to the white ceiling in 280. I think it's just stunning. Such extravagant lobbies for 2 somewhat modest buildings from the outside. 285 Riverside Drive took 285 days to build. It was originally designed with 87 units of 4 to 8 rooms with 1 to 4 baths across 16 stories. This is a typical floor plan for the lower floors, showing 6 apartments. The apartment house at 820 West End Avenue on the southeast corner of 100th Street was designed in 1925 in a Renaissance Revival style by Rosario Candela and built by Anthony Paterno. Standing 16 stories tall in the Riverside West End Historic District, It took only 250 days to build and was constructed of steel, brick, terracotta, and limestone. The terracotta cornice has unfortunately been removed, leaving the building looking quite bald by comparison. In 1926, Anthony Paterno was quoted saying, "Business expansion and the ever-increasing population in the city mean that more apartments must be built. As there is not more room to spread horizontally, new construction must be built upward, and I am of the opinion that the future will see apartments and hotels of 40 stories, or as many as the zoning law will permit, to meet the demand for housing." He continued, "Although 820 West End Avenue will not be ready for occupancy for 1 month, 70% of the 95 suites of 3 to 5 rooms each have been leased from the plans. I am confident that every suite will be rented before the house is completed, which shows the demand for small suites in well-located transit centers," unquote. Here is a typical floor plan for the building showing 6 apartments. In 1929, the firm of Boak and Paris designed their one and only building for the Paterno family, specifically Ralph Chiluzzi, husband of Teresa Paterno. Russell M. Boak and Hyman F. Paris were 2 alumni of the architect Emery Roth, who was famous for having designed the San Remo and the El Dorado. Boak and Paris established their own architectural practice in 1927. Standing 16 stories with a penthouse, 127 West 96th Street is located between Amsterdam and Columbus Avenues. The building originally consisted of 146 units of 1 to 4 rooms each, with baths, full-size kitchens, and dining alcoves, outside kitchenettes, modern gas refrigeration, and large cedar closets. 5-room maisonettes and roof bungalows were available too. Ralph Chiluzzi was quoted as saying, "Smaller suites are in demand, but these smaller suites must include rooms that are large even if few in number," unquote. Before the building was completed, 50% of the units were rented. I look forward to seeing clearer images of the terracotta detail when my photographer makes it over to this building. It looks very intricate and very interesting. And I just had to get a better look at those rooftop bungalows and penthouse. On the left is an illustration from a newspaper, and on the right is a screenshot from Google Earth. I'm not exactly sure of the layout up there, but it looks like very interesting living. And finally, we have arrived at the last building, the smallest building with one of the biggest stories. In 1936, the architect of the Chrysler Building, William Van Allen, designed for Dr. Charles Paterno a tiny prefabricated steel house to stand at 345 Riverside Drive at the southeast corner of 107th Street. Now, how did this come to be? Dr. Paterno purchased over time all 5 lots leading to the corner of Riverside Drive and 107th Street, which you can see in the pink map marked with 5 colored stars. The stars correlate to the single-family homes photographed above. This row of 4 homes was next to an empty lot on the corner marked with a pink star. This empty lot had a deed restriction that stipulated the first structure had to be a single-family home. Dr. Paterno was not in the business of single-family homes, and he had purchased these lots to build an apartment house. Also in 1936, Dr. Paterno and his son, my grandfather, rented office space in the Chrysler Building. Ostensibly, this is how they met William Van Allen, who in 1935 had started designing prefabricated affordable steel houses during the Great Depression. Dr. Paterno purchased one of these steel houses for this empty lot on the corner, and it stood there for 5 years to satisfy the deed restriction. In 1937, the New Yorker wrote about the quote, small, square, white pointed, single story modernistic house, unquote, that included a compact kitchen, a dinette paneled with stained plywood, a 12 by 12 living room, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, made from 2 by 4 foot steel panels bolted together with 4 windows. It met Federal Housing Authority standards and was classified as a, quote, low-cost working man's residence, unquote. Dr. Paterno died before he could construct an apartment house here, and the lots were sold by his son to the builder who would construct the 6-story apartment house that stands at 345 Riverside Drive today. And those are the 32 Paterno buildings in Bloomingdale, of which only 4 have been demolished. I hope you've recognized a building or two. If you would like to learn more about any of the 164 Paterno buildings, you can visit my website at paternoarchitecture.com for much more information on each and every building. Also, at any time through my website, you may email me using the contact form if you have questions or information to share. I hope this presentation has been informative and entertaining for you. Thank you for being here today with me as we explore the impact of the Paterno family on your beautiful neighborhood. And if you are interested in learning more about all the Paterno buildings and how the events in the lives of the builders affected their timeline and decisions, or learning all about the mythical Paterno Castle on the Hudson River, or learning about the 35 monogrammed terracotta cartouches all around Manhattan, I was just invited back to the New York Adventure Club to present a 3-part online series in July. You can find out more about those webinars on my website. And that's that. And we'll go to some questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, Carla. That was absolutely wonderful. I learned so much about the Paterno family and the architects they worked with and the background of the building names and the rents. I particularly enjoyed the Rutherford and prefab stories. They were terrific. Michael, we'll turn it over to you now to share questions.
Got it. Thank you. So again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat and the Q&A, or if you want to ask them out loud, just raise your hand and we'll go one by one. But the first few questions we had was, first, do you know why so many buildings in Bloomingdale were around the 13-story building limit for the Paterno buildings?
I think that is just what their kind of template was at the time. You know, they started off at 5, you know, and slowly went up. I think their tallest was 23 on 5th Avenue. I think based on the building materials and the lot sizes, between restrictions and technology, I think that, and also just what people preferred. They were very interested in what the residents were going to want. And I think that that was a popular height. And I think that it was very efficient because, as you noticed, they put these buildings up very quickly. They had the oldest brother, Saverio, he actually went back to Italy, to Castelmezzano, and became the mayor there. And he sort of became a depot for Southern Italian laborers looking for work in the New World. And so they had like their own private employment office just shipping over a steady stream of laborers. So they had these huge crews and, you know, devoted to the Paterno family from, you know, Italy to Manhattan directly. And so this was also before the 1940s 40-week labor laws. And so they worked upward. I mean, I think a regular week of work was minimum 60 hours. And so they just had these huge crews that would put these apartment houses up. And I think that that's, you know, sort of the template that they had for the area and what they were able to construct in a time frame that would keep them moving along with building and selling.
Got it. Another question that came up was, Can you illuminate servant quarters and penthouse spaces? And did passenger elevators reach penthouse level?
I don't always have those details. Unfortunately, my family didn't keep their records. So don't really have detailed plans of all these buildings and all the floors. And so, I know at one time it was fashionable for domestic workers to live on the rooftop or in the penthouses, or they had small rooms within the apartment. I think that most of the Paterno buildings that had housekeeping accommodations had them attached to the apartment. But for the few Paterno buildings that had penthouses, I'm not 100% certain if domestic workers lived up there or if they were built originally for actual apartments for residents. And then as far as the elevators going up to the penthouses, that I don't know without the blueprints and the plans. And I would love to have an ambassador in every single Paterno building. The handful of buildings that I am in contact with somebody who lives there, sometimes they can let me know of what the building layout is like and how the building works, and maybe what are original elements and features and what are retrofitted, more modern features. But as far as historically and what was originally planned, unfortunately, I don't have that information. I don't know where all the original building documents went. This was just work for the Paternos. They built them, they sold them and moved on and probably never looked back. And so they weren't thinking about archiving anything.
Got it. So, was there any buildings where they handled the the real estate leasing for any of the buildings, or did they just sell most of them?
There were some buildings that they hung on to longer than others. Most of them they turned around pretty quickly, especially once their reputation was well established and well known and well appreciated. They were able to turn buildings over pretty quickly. And you even heard me mention that sometimes the buildings were sold just from the plans, even before the building was complete. And that's when people knew the quality of a Paterno Brothers building. They had confidence in the quality. And but there were some buildings that they did, they either hired a firm to do the rentals, or they worked alongside those firms in promoting the buildings and renting them out. And there were some buildings they hung on to longer than others. I don't know how they made those decisions. Let's see, just a couple buildings family members actually lived in. So I don't think it was a sentimental thing or a proximity thing to the family. They were excellent builders and very keen businessmen. And so it probably just all boiled down to the bottom line and what was good for business and what made sense. But they did rents. They were involved in the renting of some of them over many years.
Do you know have you ran into any old copies of the original leases from these buildings by any chance?
No, unfortunately, I have not. I'm just always digging for information. Somebody contacted me last year, and he's in possession of some bond notes for one of the buildings that Anthony Campagna built. I'm not quite sure how he came to be in possession of those. He didn't answer that question. But that was probably the most unique paperwork I've seen on any of the buildings. I mean, I'm thrilled when there's, some kind of documentation of a floor plan. But most of the time it's just exterior photos that are historically documented. I wish that my family had hung on to their records, because that would be quite the treasure trove of documents to tell this story.
Wait, also, give me 1 second. If you could actually stop your screen sharing so we can,
Okay,
sorry about that.
there we go.
Thank you. And then does any of your extended family are any of them still involved in the real estate business today?
There are, I guess they would be grandsons or great grandsons. Some are in the field of construction, whether it's smaller projects or private homes or even some commercial buildings. Along with this work of studying the buildings, I've also been studying the genealogy. A lot of these people I've not known until 3 years ago. So to pull all the buildings together was also to pull all the descendants together and share with them what I have learned about our collective family. And they would know bits and pieces about their direct ancestor and information down that line, but it didn't spread horizontally very well until just these past 3 years. So I have met several cousins who are in the construction business, but nothing to the extent of the this segment of the Paterno family, and nothing in Manhattan that I know of.
Got it. You mentioned some of the paternals lived in some of the buildings. Do you know off the top of the head which ones?
Yep. Joseph Paterno and his wife lived at the Coliseum in Morningside Heights, Riverside Drive and 116th Street. They moved in right after construction was done. I think one of the 300s on Riverside Drive, I think one of the sisters moved in there after her husband died. And actually, when my grandfather got married to my grandmother, Carlo and Helen, Dr. Paterno gifted them with a building as a wedding gift, not a building that the Paterno family built, but a very nice building at 230 Central Park South. And so that was their wedding gift. And they lived there for many, many years. And one of my grandfather's aunts lived there in the same building with them also. So, you know, here and there, they jumped around. Some of the early buildings in maybe some of the early Bloomingdale buildings, but I think a little further north on 112th Street, they would build some of the early smaller apartment houses, and the family would move in, and then they'd build the next one, and the family would jump over there until I think around 1910 or so, the brothers built 2 twin homes in Washington Heights for Mama Carolina, and some of the married children, all the unmarried children. And it was 2 buildings, 3 floors each, and they would all kind of cycle in and out on different floors like Italian families from the old world, I think, tend to do. And so I think once those twin homes kind of became the anchor for the family, I don't think that there was so much jumping around into the buildings, the apartment houses that they actually built.
Got it. Do you know how the materials for how the materials for the building construction costs were funded, and also where those materials came from?
Don't know about exactly like which granite quarries or which exactly brick manufacturers or the limestone came from. I know a lot of the terracotta was some of the New Jersey terracotta manufacturing plants, I guess they're called plants. So I don't have documentation of every bit of material. Every now and then I'll find a mention in a newspaper or some kind of record. Most of the records I found about terracotta architectural detailing and where that terracotta was made. And then as far as funding the building, they would get construction loans. And then once it was done, convert it to a mortgage. And then either they would hold on to it for a short time or they would sell it immediately. So I think they were just building and selling and taking the proceeds and putting it into the next project.
Do you know if there were any exclusions that were made for any prospective tenants for the buildings?
The only one that I know for sure, because I've seen it in writing, was Hudson View Gardens, I think was not so friendly to Black families or Jewish families. I think that that is the story. That's the only one that I've seen explicitly mentioned. Being Italians, immigrating from Italy, Italians weren't well received in America at the turn of the century. And so, not that they weren't without prejudice or bias, but they were used to also receiving it. So they certainly know how it felt. But as they ascended in their success story and became more wealthy, maybe they got a little more snobby. I don't know. I think as businessmen, they were just trying to appeal to whatever clientele they were trying to fill the apartment houses with. So, I've not seen anything but on one building. So out of, 155 apartment houses, I'm not proud of the fact for that one building, but at least it was only one that we know of for sure.
And can you speak more about the relationship they had to the workers and how that worked out between the family and the people in Italy and the people here in the US?
Well, I've become a student of Southern Italian history myself just recently to better understand the climate of Southern Italy when my family left. And as many people will know, it was a very impoverished section of the country. So many people were looking for work elsewhere. And there were, so many grand reports of the roads being paved in gold and the land of opportunity and the new world, and that they could go there and make a lot of money and send it home, or make a lot of money and pay for your family to come join you. And so I think that there were a lot of people wanting to leave. And Saverio Paterno, the oldest brother who had moved back to Castelmezzano, he and his wife would teach them some basic English, which was really kind of funny to me because his wife was British. So whatever English they were learning was British English with an Italian accent. And they would get them set up with their travel records and whatever documents and papers they needed, and some, basic words for what they needed when they arrived on the American shore. And they were directed just to ask for Paterno, and they went straight to the Paterno brothers. And as far as any kind of direct relationship that they have, I don't have any documentation. Have not heard any stories from other people about their ancestors who may have worked for the Paterno brothers. But I would imagine it was probably a pretty brutal situation, building these apartment houses. Is grueling work. It's dangerous work. And this was before Franklin D. Roosevelt that had, instilled any sort of protections for laborers and curbing how many hours a day or a week that they could work. So I imagine it was probably a pretty grueling situation. I'd like to think that my ancestors were kind to them, but again, they were businessmen and Italian businessmen, and they might have been, tough dudes to work for. I don't know one way or the other, but I do know with Dr. Paterno, being part of the operation. And then Anthony Campagna was actually a trained lawyer. He studied at the University of Rome and the University of Naples before he came to America. So having a doctor and a lawyer in the building business, I think, was probably a benefit to a lot of the workers who might have had legal issues, legal questions, medical issues, medical questions for themselves or their families. So I hope that, you know, I hope the Paterno family looked after their crews, but, you know, it was also the early 1900s, you know, it was a lot tougher living at the time.
I guess the final question I have here is, do you know anything of the family still out in Italy?
Yes, there are branches of the family still in Italy. My family and I are going to Casalmezzano for our first time this fall. So I'm hoping to meet some family members. Casalmezzano still is a very small mountainous village. When my family left, the population was about 2,000. And now the population is about 700. So it has lost many citizens, like so many small villages in Italy. And they're trying to attract people back, definitely attract descendants to come back and visit their roots and where their ancestors came from. So I'm in touch with the mayor of Casalmezzano. So he's anticipating our visit in September. And one wonderful announcement that has been made is that this Mayor Nicola Veluzzi, he put in a grant request for money to fund a museum in Casalmezzano dedicated to the Paterno and Campagna family and all the building work that they did in Manhattan. So they are very, very, very proud of anybody who comes from their village and anything wonderful that they did anywhere in the world. So they take full credit for it, which is fine. And they are going to establish this interactive museum and showcase everything that the Paternos and Campagnas did. And what legacy they left in Manhattan. So that's going to be a wonderful project to work on and see come to fruition. And I'm going to hopefully plug in there to hopefully make at least part of it definitely virtual, but maybe also transportable. So maybe we can have a traveling exhibit that maybe could come to New York and we could share it there also.
Well, I hope to see that sometime in the future.
I would too.
That sounds absolutely marvelous, Carla. I hope that takes place. I'm sure there were many residents of Paterno buildings on the call today, and many folks, myself included, who are going to take a much closer look at all of these buildings in the neighborhood. Once again, marvelous presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today, and to everyone in the audience, thank you for joining us as well. And everyone have a good night.
And
Thank
on a
you.
final note too, Pam Tice wanted to mention that in September, the history group will be having a presentation with Alexander Wood, and his field is in the construction industry in New York City. So questions about construction might be answered there as well.
Excellent.
Thank you,
All right,
Michael.
have a good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.